Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from the Frontier. Thank you for stopping by. I had quite a busy morning actually. Got to a function that Samsung were hosting for their new K-Zoom launch, which is a camera. Zoom into life, it's called, is the hashtag Zoom into life. And we took a selfie, Fareed and Manoj and myself, and I said to him, given how many selfies I tend to take, uh, it, I said to Manoj, it's so sharp, and it's something like 21 megapixels on the selfie reverse camera. Pretty smart. In between, I popped over to Nation FM, where we spoke about the NSC IPO. Peter Mwangi, the CEO, was there. Jane De Kisera, who writes for The Nation. We were hosted by Lorna Irungu and Angela Angweni, and I'll put up a picture of that. That was quite fun. And then I went back to the Samsung launch, and so ran about a little bit this morning. Of course, on Saturday, the 26th, we have Mindspeak. I'm looking forward to hosting Joshua. Joshua is the CEO of Kenya Commercial Bank. I did an interview with him, pretty in-depth one, in November last year. If you have a chance, do have a look at that, because it's interesting to see. And then prior to that, we had a Mindspeak session in December 2012 with Dr. Martin Oduor Otieno, and that is an interesting precursor to Saturday's Mindspeak. I think there's a link if you're interested in knowing what it's all about. There's a link we put together, and there's also another link for the Mindspeak sessions this year. Home Thoughts returned to a view of Nairobi that I took from my office, which is on the 8th floor here, 182 days ago, and you could see something flying through the sky, and that's why I think I kept going back to Pynchon's, Pynchon's Gravity's Rainbow. Sports greats. This is Michael Jordan, a tweet I saw yesterday, and sort of, the relentlessness of Michael. I'm going to put up another photograph I took of a sea of clouds above Nairobi, 35,000 feet. That photograph I took as we were flying. I can't remember where we were going. And then another photograph of the seaside in Diani, where the sea was so still and calm. Hunter S. Thompson, because of yesterday, I've still been reading more of him. Anything that gets your blood racing is probably worth doing. And then talking of San Francisco, which is a wonderful city and one I would consider living in, frankly. Life goes on. Hope rises and dreams flicker and die. Love plans for tomorrow and loneliness thinks of yesterday. Life is beautiful and living is pain. The sound of music floats down a dark street. A young girl looks out a window and wishes she were married. A drunk sleeps under a bridge. It is tomorrow. Zero Hedge tweeted, "The West's public enemy number one." And it's a pretty arresting photograph, I must admit. And of course, it's Vladimir Putin. And he has apparently made a speech where he spoke of scenarios which destabilize the existing world order and threaten Russia's sovereignty. There's a link on Rich Rapport, so if you want to read the speech in full, I'll just pull out some salient points. However, ever more frequently today we hear of ultimatums and sanctions. The very notion of state sovereignty is being washed out. Undesirable regimes, countries that conduct an independent policy or that simply stand in the way of somebody's interests, get destabilized. Tools used for this purpose are the so-called color revolutions, or, in simple terms, takeovers instigated and financed from the outside. As for the terrible tragedy that occurred in the sky above Donetsk, we would like once again to express our condolences to the families of the victims. It is a terrible tragedy. Russia will do everything within its power to ensure a proper, comprehensive and transparent investigation. We are asked to influence the militia in the southeast. As I have said, we will do everything in our power, but this is absolutely insufficient. I also feel that we must think about additional steps to decrease the dependence of the national economy and financial system on negative external factors. I'm not just referring to instability in global markets, but possible political risks as well. My conclusions are that opening two fronts, and I'm speaking of the pivot, which is to China and Asia, and Ukraine-Russia, was in my opinion ill-advised and unnecessary. I thought, and still think, the overarching challenge to the US is China. It's not Russia. Russia, in many respects, is entirely irrelevant. And to date, I see no good reason why Putin would have ordered the MH17 to have been shot out of the sky, whereas I can understand motivation from the other side. And that took me to Pepe Escobar, chessboard drenched in blood, who said the MH17 tragedy may have been a horrendous mistake, but it may also have been a desperate gambit by the Kiev minions of the Empire of Chaos. And I think, on balance, that it might well have been on the evidence that I've seen. There seems to be a strong possibility that international law has been violated in a manner that could amount to war crimes. This is Navi Pillay, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. As the death toll on the 16th day of conflict topped 700, more than 690 Palestinians and 34 Israelis, and in that ratio you see the disequilibrium, plus one Thai agricultural worker. Pillay told an emergency debate at the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva that Israel had not done enough to protect civilians, citing airstrikes and the shelling of homes and hospitals. Pillay also condemned Hamas and other militant groups for indiscriminate attacks on Israel. Her comments were seen as a warning to Israel about its obligations under international law. She also called for an end to the blockade of Gaza, the underlying reason for the conflict, and an issue that would have to be tackled if any ceasefire were to endure. In particular, I think Navi Pillay was speaking to that incident on the beach in Gaza, and I'll put up a photograph of that unfortunate episode. And going back to what I was saying yesterday, I do believe that this 2014, which is a bit of a Groundhog Day, I suppose. Somebody was telling me it happens every 3 years. But I think, if you look at the response globally via social media, there has been a massive trend change or even an inflection point. And I think Israel would be wise to consider it. Euro 134.46, the dollar has rallied 1.7% against the euro this month and is at the highest level since November. Dollar index, that's grinding higher, 80.84, Japanese yen unchanged at 101.42, Swiss franc 0.9032, the pound coming back towards the 170 level, that's softening, 170.38, Aussie holding above 0.94 at 0.9439, India rupee 60.06, South Korean won 10.2870, Rial 2.2189, the Egyptian pound 7.1535. We've been here for eternity. And the South African rand is firmed up a little bit further, 10.5414. I'll put up a 3-month chart of the euro dollar, and you can see the dollar is at November highs against the euro, and I think it's looking as if whilst it's a grind, the grind is gaining speed ever so gradually. Dollar index, again, that's grinding higher, 80.84. And a lot more bullish comments coming out of commentators. As I read, we're getting to the turning point for the dollars. We begin to see an upward creep in front-end yields, with the US's first rate increase since 2006 forecast for next year. The Fed on course to end its currency depreciating bond purchase program by December. Investors are becoming more optimistic about the dollar. That's a turnaround from the first half when the greenback suffered its first back-to-back quarterly declines versus major trading peers since 2011. Paul Mackel from HSBC saying we're in the early stages of a dollar bull cycle unfolding now. I'd like to see it above the dollar index, above that resistance level, where it failed last time, and then we can decide, because A lot of people, including myself, expected this to unfold some time ago, and it's been a very drawn-out process. IMF is saying the US economy will rebound in the second half of 2014 and expecting growth of 3% for 2015. Economic activity in the US accelerated in the second half of 2013, but an unusually harsh winter conspired with other factors, including an inventory correction, causing momentum to fade in early 2014, leading to a contraction in growth of 2.9% in the first quarter. But I think that was entirely weather-related. Gold back below 1300 at 1296.08 trades poorly in my view. The metal has retreated for 3 days and is on course for the first back-to-back weekly drop since May. Crude oil 102.89, what a buy, it was below 100. I'll put up a 1-month chart. I think it remains that's the place to try and buy it, and let's see how things develop. But for now, I think we have a huge amount of uncertainty, and as somebody said, the simplest way to measure geopolitical risk is to look at the price of energy, not gold, in my view, and I agree with that. Energy is everything for the macroeconomist, and I agree with that completely. I'll also put up another twit pic that Zero Hedge posted, which is an annotated history of world oil price shocks. Coming to Africa, I found this diagram of Africa's inter-African trade versus intra-continent trade elsewhere. You can see we're at an egregious level. Africa report saying Africa's urban food markets will increase fourfold by 2030, and small and unlisted companies setting out to supply them hold high yield potential, increasing urbanization, fast-growing middle classes. Africa's urban food markets are expected to grow fourfold by 2030. There is a growing food gap between regional demand and supply, and between regional supply and global demand. South African all share up 12.226% this year, not far off a record. However, this is interesting. South Africa is seeking to limit foreign land ownership. The principle is that foreign nationals should not own land in the country, but should have a long lease at a minimum of 30 years. This is the Land and Rural Development Minister Gugile Quinty telling reporters. I think it's an ill-advised idea. This is completely ill-conceived, said Andrew Golding, Chief Executive of Pam Golding Properties, particularly when there is a misconception that foreigners are pouring to South Africa and pushing prices up. Be interesting to see how the South African market reacts to that. Dollar rand, I'll put up a 1-month chart moving back a little bit firmer. We were on the ropes at one time, you'll remember, but now I think we'll go back and see if we can push at 10.30. Vodacom reported first quarter sales rose on sub-Saharan African data boom. And I've been saying it's an information century for eternity, and I think I like to see those numbers because it confirms that. So South Africa's sales advanced 2% in the quarter, while international mobile data revenue increased 51%. So there you go. Egyptian pound, as I said, 715.32. Egyptian stock market up 26.26% this year. It's Africa's best. Nigerian all shares up 3.2316% so far this year. Bombs in North Nigeria's Kaduna killed at least 82, says Reuters. A suicide bomber targeting a moderate Muslim cleric killed at least 32 of the cleric's congregation on a busy commercial road. Shortly after, a second blast killed 50 people in the crowded KO market on Wednesday. Thousands were gathered for prayers with Sheikh Tahiru Bauchi in Murtala Muhammad Square, and when his convoy pulled up, the bomber lunged at him before being stopped by his private security, witnesses and police said. The attack was targeted at the sheikh. No arrest has been made. The bomb did not injure Bauchi, several witnesses told Reuters. That takes me back to Abu Bakr Shaka, who said, "We are in your city," addressing Goodluck Jonathan, and he certainly is. And I was just saying then, bombings in Abuja and Westgate confirmed the potency of asymmetric risks. Ghana Stock Exchange is up 8.0652%, but the currency is down more than 30%. Annual producer price inflation rose to a fresh 4-year high of 33.1%. The World Bank is advising Ethiopia to consider devaluing the currency. Ethiopia should consider devaluing its currency to boost exports, as they are mostly unprocessed products and need to stay competitive on price, the World Bank economist said on Tuesday. Ethiopia's main exports are coffee, horticultural products, oilseeds, livestock, and they're operating a very managed floating rate exchange system. The last big devaluation was in 2010 when the birr lost 16.7% of its value to the dollar. The central bank quoted the birr at 19.6511. By the only measure of real exchange rate, Ethiopia's currency is 31% overvalued, so the World Bank's lead economist in Ethiopia. Interesting article on Bloomberg, well worth looking. Ethiopia becomes China's China in search for cheap labor. Interviewing a Chinese gentleman who set up a factory. Ethiopia is exactly like China 30 years ago, said Zhang, who quit the military in 1982 to make shoes from his home in Jiangxi province with 3 sewing machines, and now supplies such brands as Nine West and Guess. The poor transportation infrastructure, lots of jobless people. 3 years ago, Zhang began his Ethiopian adventure at the invitation of the late Prime Minister Meles Zenawi. But he's frustrated by widespread inefficiency, struggling to raise factory productivity from a level he says is about a third of China's. And it's a very interesting piece that Bloomberg have put together here, and it's all about this idea that given where average per capita GDP is going in China, that there's going to be room for Africa to step in to become a low-cost manufacturer. And I think Ethiopia certainly is trying to achieve exactly that. Angola, Fitch said Angola could meet Banco Espirito Santo Angola guarantee, but that it could erode buffers. So it's becoming a concern. But when you look at Angola's finances, they're pretty robust, well, at least if you go by the resources. SAP Miller Zimbabwe says lager sales were sharply down. Lager volume sales fell 21% during the first quarter to June. And that's a clear signal of the contraction that's going on in Zimbabwe's economy. Capital raised through IPO activity on African stock exchanges in 2014 has now surpassed the total raised during the whole of 2013. So that's another strong signal. Senegal raised $500 million from the sale of a 10-year bond at a yield of 6.25%. But look at this, investors placed more than $4 billion of orders, the banker said. UNCTAD, in their World Investment Report, says FDI inflows in 2013 in Kenya practically doubled to $514 million from $259 million previously, 98% increase. However, they're saying, flows to the entire region were at $6.2 billion. Tanzania recorded the highest inflows of $1.872 billion, growing at 7.5%, very much the darling all of a sudden in the EAC, but challenges remain with Tanzania. I'm going to put up the selfie I took with Peter Mwandi, the CEO of the Nairobi Securities Exchange, when I asked him that I wanted to take one. He said, Ali Khan, I just don't know where it's going. And I said to him, just think viral. So we took a selfie before the Cabinet Secretary, Henry Rotich, arrived. The NSE Kenya is selling 66 million shares at 9 shillings and 50 cents a share. Henry Rotich spoke of the IPO listing will stimulate innovation in the stock market. I don't think is wrong. So exciting moment. It's been quite a long journey, and it's good news all round. NIC Bank, by the way, quite cheap in my view. NIC Bank reported first half profit after tax accelerated 9.4%. Total assets up marginally, loans and advances up about 10%, interest income up 19.5%, interest expense up 34.5%, then profit before tax up 10.7%, earnings per share up 8.4%. And there's a link for segment breakdown, geographical breakdown. Better than solid in my view, and always considered a potential morsel for a bigger bank who wants to just get into the region. Kenya shilling trading at 87.851. Nairobi all share up 10.332% this year. NSE 20 down 0.8932% this year. The stock market's been a little bit becalmed. It's difficult to understand why, but I think the path is higher after the circumspection is over. Once again, thanks for stopping by. Don't forget Mindspeak Saturday. Breakfast from 9:30, start at 10.